Bom dia a todos.
A good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for attending the Brazil Santos Investor Day. We are finally able to do this in person after having to hold all of our meetings online. It is a pleasure to be with you because Santos Brazil Day is happening and comes back at a very important day, which is the celebration of 25 years of our existence. This is a young company that has become prepared for the next 25 years and will continue, of course, to grow and evolve. We're going to speak about our recent background and dwell considerably on the future. Now, Santos Brasil maintains steady communication with investors, with the capital market in general, and with banks. But this year, we insisted on inviting all of the employees of Santos Brasil to also participate. Therefore, thank you for your participation. Thank you for attending this event, whether it is in person or online. This event is being broadcast through YouTube, through LinkedIn, with translation and with sign language. For those who need the earphones for translation, we do have some available here. I would like to introduce the speakers. To my right, Mr. Antonio Carlos Sepúlveda, the CEO, Daniel Pedreira Doria, the CFO, Mr. Ricardo Buteri, our commercial officer, Carlos Quintero, our liquid bulk officer, and Beatriz de Toledo Dupuy, our corporate and sustainability communication manager. I know practically all of you. I am the strategic manager for investor relationships and manager in this field. I would like to give the floor to Antonio Carlos Sepúlveda, the company CEO. A good morning to all of you, and thank you for devoting this morning to Santos Brasil. My name is Antonio Carlos Sepúlveda. I have been the CEO since 2010. First of all, I will present an overview of the company's business, and then my partners will go into greater detail. Here we have the Santos Brasil timeline that was founded in 1997. This is a very special year for Santos Brasil, where we celebrate 25 years of existence. Everything began with the lease of Santos Brasil during the presidency of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, where there was privatization going on. Since the beginning of the project, we were large shareholders, and this, of course, led to another characteristic. We have managers who have remained in the company for many years. I am the second CEO in these 25 years, and other executives and officers tend to remain for long periods in the company. This has enabled us to continuously work on our project. We began with foreign trade in Brazil. We were innovative, disruptive, and stood out in the sector of infrastructure and logistics in Brazil. Another important characteristic of the company is that search, that quest of being attuned with society and its desires, its wishes. At the company, we tend to say, besides having that enormous number of licenses we need from customs and the granting powers, we also have to have a social license to operate this business that has multiple interfaces, interferes in the life of the municipalities that surround us. And of course, we're interconnected with the world. We were greatly concerned in building a company with very high levels of governance since the very beginning. Santos Brasil began the company as as an open company and with a fiscal board. This is the foundation of our culture. Now, this year, we had a very interesting fact. We always participate in these annual reports that measure companies, and we ended up being awarded in the category of infrastructure according to Negocios 360. This has a very special meaning for us because of the breadth of the analysis is a holistic analysis that takes into account all of the dimensions of the company and also the vision of the future, which was very clearly perceived. Another interesting point of this award is the sampling. The infrastructure sector has enormous companies building highways and other types of infrastructure, and we were able to win this award, which is something that enables us to feel a great deal of pride in the company. Our strategy at present, our business strategy, is divided into three growth vectors or pillars. Our starting point, which are the containers and general cargo, and we're referring to vehicles. And at the port of Imbituba, we work a great deal with general cargo in the south of Brazil. And of course, this supports the other areas that we have using the surrounding synergy. But our main business is that of containers. We have Tecon Santos, which is our supreme terminal, and it is very difficult to surpass this terminal because of the size of this terminal in the port of Santos. With the type of management it is under, it is very difficult to surpass in all of its dimensions. Our second business refers to integrated logistic, which is very important. The integrated logistics basically takes place in the port of Santos. What we attempt to do is work with cross-selling with the 2,200,000 containers that are unloaded at the port of Santos. This, of course, is our springboard. And in the last 3 years, we have worked to transform logistics, investing mainly in intelligence. This has been our focus in terms of logistic, and we have clearly divided this in port logistic and integrated logistic that works with VPL. Presently, this is a business that has reached 100 million in terms of EBITDA, with a very clearly defined strategy going forward. Differently from the other businesses, this is asset light, and this is our focus in logistics. This is where we carry out heavy investments, logistics in the port, where we need to have infrastructure for our bound warehouses. Now, the distribution centers and the rest are asset light, and we do make the most of the synergies at the port. And our newer business, the liquid bulk, that began at the port of Itaqui with 3 auctions. We carefully surveyed this possibility. We fought to take this business because of the adherence that it has to agribusiness. This is a terminal that will foster agribusiness, and this is our vision. Brazil presently produces 70% of the diesel oil that it consumes, 20% is imported, and what is not imported has intense cabotage transportation to the port of Itaqui. We were able to anticipate the startup of the project. It has been in operation for some time already, and the more we go in depth in that region, the more we're able to observe the incredible opportunities and enormity of that market. The transformation of cattle raising in agriculture, this consumes a great deal of transportation and the handling of equipment for the harvesting period. And we're extremely enthusiastic with this. There is some cross-selling with Tecon Santos. We do handle a great deal of liquid containers. We have trading, of course, that will work with other chemical products that can also use our terminal at Itaqui. We're going to have a presentation further ahead, more specific. We have Mr. Quintero, who is at the head of this project, and we will have a more detailed presentation on this. So these are our three vectors, our pillars, where our focus lies. We found ourselves in a very propitious moment where the three vectors for the development of the company are aligned for very strong growth in the coming years. Now, to support these three businesses, we have what we call at Santos Brasil the enablers, what will enable us to have success. Well, we have a very sophisticated company when it comes to building our products, but for obvious reasons, we work in a very simple way. We have terminals in the south, the southeast, and the north and northeast. Our history begins in the south of Catarina in Rio Grande do Sul and goes up to the Amazon region. This requires enormous efforts from the company in preserving the same image at all ports in all of the regions where we operate. We work on the experience of our employees and the experience of our customers. When we speak about the experience of customers, we don't only serve coffee at the company. What we want to do is fully understand the customer's business and understand which would be the best capital allocation so that customer can maintain a long-term relationship with Santos Brasil. We carry out surveys of the industries that we work with, and we attempt to have a very customized product for each customer in greater detail. And further ahead, you will see how all of this operates in terms of market gains and our predominance in the markets where we have a foothold. Of course, we cannot separate this from the experience of our employees. We are service renderers. We use the NPS and the great place to work. This is something we follow up on and we survey regardless of the commercial or operational areas we are dealing with. Now, ESG, our third lecture, will be referring to this. We are presently at our 14th sustainability report. And I believe I mentioned at the beginning the way that we are attuned with society to find our right place in the future, where Santos Brasil would like to be in the future and who we want to be, not only as a market, but also regarding our relationship with society at large. And our sector, when it comes to the CO2 emissions, is a sector that is quite representative. 14% of the worldwide emissions of CO2 equivalent do come from the logistics sector. In the last 2 years, we have had a change in behavior. First, in the capital markets, there has been a significant movement looking for companies that have ESG certifications, and presently several customers seeking us out, attempting to understand which is our ESG project. During the presentation, you will see our countless initiatives for decarbonization. We have Beatriz here, responsible for communication and sustainability, and she will speak about our goals, our objectives. We have some carbon neutral scope 2 units, and all of our projects are geared towards a full decarbonization within the scope in which our terminals are included. We are making strides, and we know that between 2030 and 2040, all of the companies in our sector will necessarily have to undergo this process. We're not doing this because the market demands this, but because it is possible to attain. We can do this with good returns, without heavy investments. Certainly, this requires planning. We have to think about how to attain our goals, but we can do this without hampering our return on capital invested. We observe the climate change throughout the world, and each company will have to do its part in this area. The third enabler, technology and innovation. Since the beginning, we have been a disruptive company, and the coming year we will receive the unmanned equipment at Tecon Santos. It will take us 2 years to install the equipment. We're referring to electrical equipment, and this is aligned with the decarbonization of the terminal. They are electrical equipment, and it also is aligned with a gain of productivity. They can operate 24 hours as they are unmanned. They're connected to the system, and in the future, the entire Tecon Santos will be operated by this automatic equipment.
Our fifth point is financial discipline. We've always been very strict on that. The company is nearly Spartan. We are preserving our cash in the most difficult moments, and we have discipline in paying dividends to our shareholders. So we are always building our company very responsibly, and Danielle will go into more details about that. The last enabler is regulatory expertise, and this comes with time. The company has been working in infrastructure for 25 years, leases and concessions. We were able to extend all of the contracts we had to extend. We never left any clause behind. A concession contract is what gives it life, and that's what we depend on. So we always have a very good relationship with the regulators and with the government. This is always done with all the transparency we can, following all the good governance requirements. So now I'll discuss Tecon Santos with you, and I'd like to draw your attention to one point. This graph shows a very interesting thing. It's an overview of the industry in the last decade. And at the top, we see the smaller terminals leaving the market because they were unable to compete any longer with the size of the ships that started to come to Santos. So the transportation industry changed significantly from 5 to 6 TEU ships. We went to bigger ships very quickly, and smaller terminals could no longer compete. Here we can see BTP and Abraport coming in. BTP is a very tough competitor. Their shareholders are two of the biggest ship owners in the world, but this demonstrates the quality of our products. In the last 10 years, only in two were there other leaders in the Santos port. And it's not for lack of trying. It's not that Tecon Santos is too big and there was no space for anyone else. The others only started getting more traffic from 2020 and 2021. This just demonstrates how careful we are about our products, and that adds a lot of value to our clients. They cannot get it from anywhere else. So when we talk about customer experience, this is what we mean. This is how we translate that customer experience becoming a product and being monetized by the company. So this is our productivity graph. You can see that we're always at around 100 movements per hour. There was a drop in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic, but this is a very interesting graph because it shows how precisely we run our operations. And why is it per hour? Well, we had a good level with our clients, and it shows how dominant our products are, especially in the Santos port. We have an investment project. Many of you have been keeping track of it, and it started as we extended our contract in Tecon Santos. We started in the first phase, which was the basic part of the project, including construction. The terminal now has 2.4 million TEUs, and the second phase has a capacity of 2.6, and our final capacity will be 3 million TEUs. So I'll show you how we believe this is happening in Tecon Santos and how it will happen there. This is a snapshot of our industry. In order to have this 2.2 to 2.4 million TEUs in 2023, well, we had to start in 2019 when we created our first berth. So we started this investment, and when you base yourself on your demand, that's how you get a return on your investments. So we had a good study of the market and the different industries in order to have a good understanding of what the prediction would be and to keep it real. And this is how we based our investments. So that boost elevated our terminal to 2.4 million by 2023. And we hope in 90% occupation rates. We've done it since 2022. Before that, we had a higher level of idleness due to BTP and Byport. And here we return to what we always wanted to do, to only have 10% additional capacity, despite the fact that now we have 2.6 million TEUs, and we will have that by 2024. If at any point we see an opportunity of going beyond that, it will require advanced investments. So we're always looking into it. We're always seeking opportunities to gain market share. Our Tecon has a good prepared basis for that. So from this phase, 2.6 million, our investments are more directed towards automation, higher density, and decarbonizing our terminal. So this path is already set. We have an executive project, and we've been dosing our capex, as I said before, to seek a good occupation curve. We've been able to hit it very well in the last 2 years, and the port is doing very well right now. We're in a good moment. So what is happening now in Santos? Santos has been growing by 3 to 4% a year. Santos Brasil has the opportunity of growing more than that because we can still provide a lot of capacity with a very high service quality. So what you'll see in Santos now is Tecon Santos growing consistently, gaining market share in the Santos port and having better margins. This will be the movement that we predict for the next 4 to 5 years. Market share gains and better margins. So we're in a very good moment. We got very well prepared for this part of the cycle, and it's a given. There's no way of reverting this. We have a second container terminal that is now receiving a second stage of investments. It's called Vila do Conde, and it's an explosive region growing at a much higher rate than Brazil. It was published on Valor Econômico magazine yesterday that the environmental license was approved for Pedral do Lourenço, and that will enable a waterway in Tocantins, which will make the region develop much more than it already has. We started with 217,000 TEUs, and it's gone up. So we hope to reach 300,000 TEUs very soon. And that's why we are starting an investment plan with 103 million Brazilian reals. Tecon Imbituba was a project that did not work for containers because laws changed. Two ship owners came into Santa Catarina with a lot of strength, so it was very difficult to compete with them. So we had to rebalance our plan. When the tender started, when the economic feasibility study was made for the project, we had different laws. So we were able to suspend payments in 2020, and we're requesting a rebalance for this, attempting to even get a payback, or excuse me, a reimbursement for any investments made. TEV is a vehicle terminal that is close to the Santos terminal. It's a very volatile product, and you can see how much it varies every year. 2022 has been a very good year, and these are figures up until June. It will probably surpass 2021 and be a little bit below our best year, which was 2017. Brazil had a stage in which almost all automobile companies were here. This process is changing. Some platforms have left the country, so there are many cars being imported and exported. A lot of agribusiness machinery produced in Brazil is being exported, so there's always an attempt to change the regulations to allow the TEV's idleness to be used for containers. If we were able to do that, and if we can verticalize the terminal with a vertical parking lot, we could surpass 300,000 TEUs. But of course, it will depend on a good government plan and a good plan for the port. But it's on the table, as we said before. It can use containers, but it needs to be containers transported in the same ships that will transport vehicles. And it can also move general cargo as long as it comes in those same ships. Our third asset and the our second growth driver is logistics. We have a good range of products, and our goal here today is to use the synergies that we have as much as we can. Whether it is with imported cargo in logistics, we're currently leaders for this kind of product in the Santos port, and it can also be the after-port logistics, the last mile to the distribution centers. But our strategy is to focus on the Tecon Santos clients. We can always expand from B2B to B2C. The company is getting ready for that. Our strategy for 2023 is to advance into that market in Tecon Santos. And we believe that we can do it by integrating the entire chain from port to plants to our clients' distribution. With that, we can get better margins than by doing logistics alone. And this area is close to 20% in its EBITDA margins, which is very high for the industry, and we will explore it until the market has been exhausted. There was a time in which competition was tougher in Santos, especially with the tax crisis at the end of the Rousseff administration, but it has been growing by about 30% a year in the last years. It's been performing very well. And we are making huge efforts to redistribute our portfolio into this part. Tecon Santos has become very important in our cash generation, and we want logistics and liquid bulk to take a larger share of our portfolio to balance how our cash is generated. All of our efforts in investing capital are basically focused on Tecon Vila do Conde, expanding Tecon Santos, and liquid bulk. This area is still asset light. All of our contracts are hedged. Everything is hedged, and we're basically growing organically. We have no plans or projects to have any M&As in logistics. So to conclude my presentation, I'm going to pass it over to Ricardo Buteri, who is our CCO. But just to wrap up, I'd like to say that in the 25 years that Santos Brasil has existed, we are confident that we were able to build a very balanced product that is technically sound and strong, and that can dominate the market in which it is. But overall, it's a balanced product that is looking towards the future, looking towards society's demands, especially with regard to the climate, to the environment and people. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Ricardo Buteri.
Muito bom dia.
Good morning, everybody, and once again, I would like to thank you for spending your time with us. It's always very good to speak after Mr. Sepúlveda because he gives you an overview of what has happened throughout the company. My goal is to give you a bird's eye view and to go more in depth in the enablers of our commercial strategy, to speak a bit about the global context, Brazil, the port of Santos, and I was told that as in the last Santos Day where we were all in person, this was in 2019, and what they would like me to do is to render accounts of what we have done in terms of logistics, what has happened, and how all of this took place. And we do have some investors here, and we would like to share with you how we're managing the business unit called Integrated Logistics, which is no longer an area of support and has become a full-fledged business area. Let's speak a bit about the global context, and we have two different indices here. For those who do not know this type of KPI, to the left, we have an indicator created by Fetch. Now, the goal of this indicator is to analyze all of the possibility of interruption in global supply chains. Now, which are the indicators that we use here? The rate of occupation of ports, the conditioning of ports, sea freight, which means to say that we have a group of factors which will point out if we have the stage where the world will have to be very careful in terms of a bottleneck or a potential collapse. What does this indicator point out to us? We can speak about the past, the present, and the future. And beginning in 2020, because of the pandemic, we were forced as players to reinvent ourselves, and to reinvent yourself in the market of rendering services and logistics does not only mean to allocate capital to allow you to survive a moment of crisis. It means to be very expeditious, taking into account the impact of demand, and this includes our maritime terminals. I'm not speaking only of maritime terminals, but the intention is to generate the lowest impact for the final consumers. And what this chart also shows us, and we can back this up with our figures, is that the worst is over. The curve is a dropping curve. It has not reached the levels pre-pandemic, but this indicator is showing us the present-day reality mentioned by Mr. Sepúlveda. All of this is driven by data and is quite precise. It can explain to us what we can expect. The last 3 months have been wonderful. I'm not going to speak about this because our conference call is very close. But when this crisis disappears, it means that the precision of our predictions, we can accelerate our capital allocation to grant us greater flexibility and greater agility. And we will speak about how all of this is connected to what we do. And we have port terminals throughout the world as part of this indicator. I'm going to base myself on 3 examples here regarding maritime terminals. When we refer to China, Shanghai had a strike. 2 months working partially. Imagine China working partially for 2 months. The entire world will go into collapse because of the lockdown. When the pandemic was maintained under control, in a month, in a single month, China completely eliminated its backlog in terms of ship cargo. There is no problem in the Chinese continent at present. And we measure this with each ship that is loaded from China to Brazil. It's useless to only focus on Santos. It's a connection of all continents until they arrive at Brazil, and we have to include the exports from Brazil to other countries. Let's speak about the United States. The West Coast, fully under control. Since the beginning of the year, the regular cargoes and the number of containers that have been loaded to come to Brazil, everything is in a situation of normalcy. In the eastern part, in New York, Charleston, and Savannah, we do have bottlenecks. Now, when we think of Europe, the only sanction leading to a bottleneck in Europe is the one imposed by Russia because of their invasion of Ukraine. This, of course, has an impact on a pool of terminals, causing lines in terminals in Europe. So there is no greater information that we can get from this indicator in terms of the impact, the pandemic or lockdown. The situation has returned to normalcy, and the impact of this can be seen through the volumes. We can show you that our port continues to grow. When we speak about maritime freights, they remain above levels pre-pandemic. This is the Shanghai index for several sites in the world: Rotterdam, Los Angeles, New York, and even Santos. The source of this is Bloomberg. You will see that the curve, all of the curves are better adjusted, reaching a normalcy in the supply chains in general. And despite what everybody expected, that in the second quarter the freight would be much higher, this is not what is happening. The freights are dropping significantly, and I'm speaking about the global context associating freight and ports. For those players who did not foresee this and did not position themselves differently in terms of capital allocation to create a different capacity, all of these will go through very difficult situations. And going through a difficult situation is not having an occupation rate of 100% or more. We are referring to what clients expect in terms of the fees that are adjusted, properly adjusted, the speed, the delivery, the service levels. The commercial area is unable to speak about tickets, prices, and negotiations without basing ourselves on the experience of an operational management. And when we speak about the global context, I deemed it very important to present these two pieces of information to explain what is happening in Brazil. Let's speak more broadly about Brazil. Everybody says that the situation in Brazil is bullish. Now, 50% of my DNA is commercial, and a commercial person has to wake up in the morning with a great deal of motivation. The other 50% is based on statistics, and this is the culture of Santos Brasil. I cannot come here and connect you to the world without speaking of the reality, and we delve into reality through data, through statistics. The movement of containers does not stop growing. We do not have a logistic bottleneck here. This year, we're going to have more than 5 million TEUs at the Port of Santos, a record expected by many who have been working in this sector for decades. And this is very good news. It has not stopped growing, not for a single year. So if we speak about figures, it means the following. In the last 3 years, we're going from a market share with the volume of the 3 maritime terminals, Vila do Conde, Santos, and Imbituba, where we have gone from 15.3% of market share for Brazil, reaching almost 19%. When we think about the last 5 years, the market share gain has been of 3 percentage points. And a market share gain in this case, with all of the impact that we have been submitted to, doesn't mean that you're stealing a little bit of market share from competitors. It means building a new capacity, having flexibility, showing operational efficiency, so that ever more we can have a relationship of confidence between ourselves and the port, the logistic terminal. We have a relationship of trust, a long-term relationship with the 15 main ship owners that are operating in the country. Now, to refer to the Port of Santos. Now, why am I speaking of the Port of Santos and not Vila do Conde? We have to select what is more representative to share with you. We're extremely proud of Vila do Conde. It began as a very small port, and we now have 217,000 TEUs with direct exports to Europe with direct cabotage. When we speak about this in terms of cabotage in a market of 10 or 11, the difference with our competitors is enormous. Our main asset that works with 2.2 million TEUs a year, well, this doesn't deserve mention. Now, Ricardo, how can you prove that you have greater flexibility? How can you walk up to a client with this narrative and prove what you're doing? Let's take a look at this graph. We have based ourselves on the 2 main competitors at the Port of Santos. The source is Solfi, with data from the association. All of this is publicly disclosed information. We have 2 competitors, and perhaps in green you will see that these are the ships that arrive early on. We have a mooring window, and on a specific day of the week at a specific schedule. If they delay or if they arrive earlier, this will disrupt the entire system. There are 2 ways out of this. Either the ships have to wait, or we work with greater efficiency to put order in this line. Now, here we see the percentage of ships that arrived early to their calls at the port. In blue, the percentage of ships that have arrived late, and they can arrive late due to bad weather, the close down of the port of Santa Catarina, simply a delay in the arrival to the port. Now, this percentage here in blue in the middle refers to the percentage of ships that arrived precisely on the day of the week and on the schedule that we had expected them to arrive in. And we have two other indicators, the blank calls and the omitted calls that never happened. Now let's think of the following. Tecon Santos not only receives 28%, while the second runner has 11% of ships arriving early, but we also have 44% arriving late. Now, if we have the largest number of ships arriving early on and a good percentage of ships coming in delayed, shouldn't the on time of ships be higher than others? Why is it higher? Because we have produced operational efficiency where the second runner at the Port of Santos is 25% below what we are able to deliver. Tecon Santos doubtlessly is very deft at eliminating lines. Now this 23% and 19% mean that these ships that were omitted made the decision to simply not wait for the efficiency of our competitors and brought their ships to Santos Brasil, even though we did not have contracts with them. I will give you an example for 2021. Do you know the number of containers handled by Santos Brasil in 2021 under these conditions of advanced, delayed, or omitted arrivals? 80,000 containers. 80,000 containers that were reallocated from their port of origin to Tecon Santos because of the efficiency that we have in normalizing this lineup. And this is what I am referring to when I speak about our operational efficiency. And this is why we are able to sit down with 15 ship owners throughout the world to speak about true efficiency. When we speak about 2022 from January to August, the news that we would like to insist on is that even though we have vertical terminals that are subsidized by large ship owners, Tecon Santos Brasil are market leaders. Rather peculiar, isn't it? If I'm the owner of my cargo, why give it to the neighbor? It's as if I had parking in my own apartment. And leasing parking from the neighbor for some peculiar reason. Now, without speaking about why this happens, until August, Tecon Santos had 21% of market share at the Port of Santos. We have been the leaders for the last 3 years, and this will continue on until December. This leadership in market share for the reasons I have mentioned previously. We speak about the world, Brazil, and the Port of Santos. And let's now speak about our commercial strategy. The issue of containers, our container terminal, has a certain level of maturity. You have been following us for many years. You have become experts in this area. And they asked me today to speak, besides market share and volume, how our commercial strategy works, which are the enablers that allow us to release results every quarter. And of the 6 enablers that were mentioned by Carlos Sepúlveda, I would like to focus on 3, the customer centricity. And I do like the jargon that he uses, saying it's not only ice, water, and coffee that we offer the clients. There isn't a single decision in this company at top management that is not revisited from the strategic part to the operational part, where the customer is not the center of our decisions. This does not exist. Of course, this customer centricity, this relationship of customer experience, which is different from customer relationship. In customer relationship, it's that content where the client will ask for help, will complain, or congratulate us. And we're going to cite examples of what we're doing here. The logistics solutions presently are all very similar, perhaps identical. Competitors do have ports. Competitors don't have logistics assets as we do, but they outsource them. If we don't take into account these enablers that enable us to make decisions, customer centricity, understanding what is important for them and why. If we don't have data-driven technology with integration with pricing, marketing intelligence, and customer experience, how can we work with our capital allocation? By simply creating capacity, this isn't sufficient.
They might need new products, new technologies, or fast services where they are willing to pay for a little bit more because their supply chain might stop if that's not the case. And finally, operational excellence, which means agility, flexibility in providing services. We have never gotten distracted from what we are. We are genuinely service providers. That's what we are. And that means that our competitive differentials, bringing the client in, being extremely focused, sophisticated, and data-driven, will create greater opportunities to cross-sell. We have 9,000 active customers. Imagine a database of 9,000 active customers. Imagine this data lake that we developed, that we advanced, especially in the last 2 years, in a format in which we know exactly what's happening to each client, where their cargo is going, if they have third-party logistics, how much they're paying on average for shipping. This is our experience currently. It's more customized, and we're much more assertive in our commercial strategy than just making offers. Of course, our mantra is to have integrated logistics, but why should we only offer integrated logistics if our clients maybe have a transportation company? So this level of responsiveness is very important. It's how we should map and understand the market. And this should not be based on a group, but rather on an individual company. So I'm very pleased to tell you a little bit more about these enablers in Santos Brasil logistics. The commercial drivers from the previous slide cut across the entire company. We're going to be hearing about liquid bulk, about ship owners. Wagner is going to talk about direct cargo to the client. This is our mantra. This is our culture. It's a transformation that is data-driven, and by putting the client at the center, we can make a difference and not only offer a solution that already exists in the market. They copy our solutions. So our competitive edge is this. Let's look at this circle and understand what is happening at Santos Brasil. First, we truly go deep to recognize, analyze, and plan deeply, being 50% data-driven, the customer's dynamics and markets of operation. So the statistics give us the insight we need. So why are we investing 120 million in Vila do Conde? Because we mapped the northern part of the state of Tocantins, and it showed that we can leverage at least 1,000 to 2,000 containers by following market intelligence. And we know that frozen beef is driving innovation. So automatically, we have doubled our capacity in reefers. And Danielle from legal requested an expansion for an area to receive these investments. So this is what we're discussing. That sort of prediction foresees things to come with real data. And this is a part of the customer insight tripod. Now, what good is it to have good ideas and good numbers, but not executing a plan to maximize your profitability? We have a bi-weekly meeting with all areas of the company, with ship owners, importers, exporters, direct clients, and everyone. So if you've interacted with a digital company, you know that the conversion funnel exists in Santos Brasil. We are truly looking at this data and executing a sales plan to maximize our income. Since there is some idle space at the national level in some of our assets, what areas should we prioritize? What sort of storage? What sort of product? So we have a sales plan where we take, for example, markets above 36% market share, automotive, machinery, consumer goods, and we invest here in keeping track of the sales plan. And this is delivering the best experience to customers. After we receive some insights, after we execute the plan, we invite the client's top managers to talk to us in a roundtable without any sort of negotiations. How are we affecting you positively? Was it worth investing? Are we providing returns? And how am I hindering your process? Is it through logistics? Is it through the commercial or financial process? What Antonio Carlos mentioned, he is not only looking at the commercial side of companies, he looks at the entire company. So this circle is our mantra that we follow, especially to drive our growth at Santos Logistics. And finally, since we're talking about logistics, to discuss what base we create for the entire company, what can we expect from Santos Brasil Logistics? I was talking to Victor over coffee earlier, and he said in 2019 we had just arrived in the company and that we would be the strategic basis. But this is our accountability. At the time, we said we wanted to have a more sophisticated data lake for cross-selling so that we could treat clients differently, so we could actively listen to them to do what they needed to make them more loyal to the company. In 2019, our EBITDA was 8 million. In 2020-21, we went up to 38. And in 2022, in the first 6 months, so in our last conference call, we were at 52. This is not magic. We showed you how we did it very clearly. In 6 months, we made 52 million. We've been getting many questions in our conference calls, not about being skeptical of the logistics. We're getting different questions, and this motivates us. They ask if there are any detractors preventing us from having this sort of growth perpetually. And we say no. Why not? Because this has been very well defined. Antonio Carlos explained a division that is not a split, it's a complement. So we have customs logistics and 3PL. If we were to say what you can expect from logistics in Santos Brasil, well, we've shown our EBITDA levels without an M&A for what we're going to do from now on. When you talk about break bulk cargo, What are we going to continue to do? We're going to continue to grow in containerized break bulk cargo. During the pandemic, we found an opportunity. We brought freight forwards when freight was surprisingly high. And what we did was we went into a niche working with break bulk cargo because they have a higher average ticket, but it's more customized service. So we've been making strong investments. We have directors who handle this only and who provide extremely relevant operational revenue. And what about 3PL? So we have an executive from Minsk who speaks a different sort of operational language. We reinforced our team with 2 executives who have a more comprehensive perspective than just primary and secondary sales. For integrated logistics, you have to understand everything. Receival, storage, ports, imports, warehouses. In warehouses, there's a huge services portfolio. And you can believe us that we have an e-commerce company in our DC in São Bernardo do Campo without even going to the port. But of course, our strategy is to get the most we can from this source of 9,000 active companies so that a part of it comes from our main area, which is our TICON. And this is a matter of pride. We have 15-year relationships with these clients who worked with TICONs only, but now they also have transportation with us. They store in the secondary zone, and we have a distribution center for them. And we have in-house logistics in many of our clients. So from the port to their own areas. They send us a request, and we deliver the cargo that we have from their plant to the production line. So this is the new Santos Logistics. This is what we're doing. And these are the 2 items that we're truly scaling up for the next years. When we talk about the 3PL market, it represents $5 billion in Brazil alone. And this is not only bonded warehouses. As important as data client are the questions that we get from you so that we can answer as much as we can from now on. So that was the message I have, and I'll pass it over to my friend Danielle.
Bom dia a todos. Igualmente,
Good morning, everyone, and I'd like to thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone watching us online. We're being simultaneously broadcast online. Santos Brasil Investor Day is a very special occasion since we are celebrating the company's 25th anniversary. And I'll try to translate into some figures with some qualitative information as well. A lot of what was discussed by Antonio Carlos in the first session, a lot of what Ricardo Butelli said for the commercial area, and how we're doing, where we're coming from, and where we're headed to when it comes to results and when it comes to paying our shareholders' capital and expanding and making the company grow. So we'll look at a 5-year time frame, and it will help show how the company grew, how our strategy was executed very successfully, and how we got to where we are. And I'm not going to go only into the figures because figures are cold, but we're going to talk about what underlies it. We're going to talk about the main growth drivers in Santos Brasil. Repricing contracts, and it's worth talking about the key activities And we often forget that 55% of our net revenues is generated outside of the key. So it's not repricing for ship owners. It's not a single contract. Of course, it has significance, but this is repricing all of the company's service lines, from storage to container movements to 3PL, and so on and so forth. We're coming to the point in which this connects to the company's operational efficiency using our operating leverage as a driver. That's what we're doing. When you look at the next slides, you'll see how the company is operating equivalent volumes at a lower cost. We are requiring less investments in personnel and equipment. And if we look at repricing, if we look at prices, what have we done recently? Besides everything that was mentioned before, we now have an independent and autonomous area for pricing. It's not at the front lines, it's on the back of the company, giving price indicators, looking at clients, and looking at what the market is doing. What sorts of products do clients need right now? This is where we come in, and the average ticket goes up by doing that. Let's look at storage, for example. This is a high-margin business. It has high profitability for the company. Average tickets have gone up. We have higher capacity, but Tecon Santos has a 55% rate in retaining every export that we unload. So we don't want to take up space to the point that we get in the way of our operational products. And this is not a matter of price. We're not competing on price for cargo. We're competing with prices that pay for the services that we provide. If we look at the next slide, you'll see our control of costs and expenses. And this relates to our operational leverage. This year, we'll make 2 million TEUs, right? 2 million. This volume is very close to what we did in 2013 at the best moment in the company. We used to do it with 10, and now we do with 8 terminals. So this doesn't even consider equipment. This is a company that has reasonably controlled fixed costs so that you can operate at growing volumes and still perform some maintenance for the price ranges. So margins are growing, not only because prices will continue to go up, but all of the foundations of our business are aligned. We're going to see a long cycle of Santos Brasil having better results and better margins. You can write this down. This will be a long cycle. We have just began, but we have been getting ready for it for a number of years. 2017 was our worst year, 80 million EBITDA. And now, with the market, we see 800 or more. And this is what we did in 5 years. We invested for the last 5 years for the reasons that Antonio Carlos mentioned. We thought that in 2020, we would get higher volumes and our prices would go up. The pandemic appeared, but we moved our targets to 2021. We executed the company's strategy, and now we are extracting value from that. And here is something that we do every day. financial discipline and cost control. Why? Because the company has this atmosphere of being full of money, and normally things get out of control. We spend more, but we're still very strict on how much we spend. And it will be even stricter in the OPEX end so that we can have growing margins as well.
We believe that because of the quality of our assets, we have 41% of EBITDA margin. We do have a detractor, which is Imbituba, but this is a company that could deliver 50% of EBITDA margin. Tecon Santos is a terminal that because of its drivers and fundamentals, it has high volumes, a good and very sound balance, cargo mix and prices at reasonable levels. We could give us 50 to 60% of EBITDA margin, and this is where we are heading to. Now, logistics in the first 6 months of 2022, almost 2 million of EBITDA, and logistics will surpass this level. It has the ability to go beyond 100 million in EBITDA, something that has never been seen in the company formerly. So what is going to happen? The company is going to generate incredible cash, enabling us to pay out the shareholders, pay very good dividends, and continue to invest, of course, always being attentive to growth opportunities. We are going to do this without leveraging the company. Of course, the company structure will tend to change. It's not reasonable within this positive scenario to remain with so much cash going forward, but we're not going to overly leverage the company. This is a company of infrastructure, but of course it can reach higher levels than other classical leverages. We cannot overly leverage the company. Had we done this in the past, we would have faced problems in 2017, 2018. We did not do this because of our stringent controls. I spoke about costs, the cost of serving, and this enables us to understand profitability contract by contract. We offer service bundles for customers where we offer warehousing, picking, cross-docking, and line item by line item. We want to understand where we might lose money. If we're losing money in transportation, we try to renegotiate. We don't lose money based on general profitability, but based on these line items that are included in the contract. I would now like to speak about our capital allocation. The company annually prepares its budget. This is broadly discussed, negotiated, and deliberated with the board of management and advisors. But this does not mean we have a license to spend the company capital. We have an investment committee including the main leaders of the company. We have Lucia, who is here. She leads the committee. And each project that is budgeted as well as being approved is revisited, which means that it will have to be approved once again, revisited, undergo a new analysis. Now, this enables us to exert a precise control on the use of the company capital because This is, of course, the heritage, the equity of the shareholders, the equity of the main shareholders, and of course of some of the main employees. Now, this is the responsibility that we think with when spending the company capital. In this investment cycle, the focus is on investments with a high return, especially based on the present-day assets. Tecon Santos, Vila do Conde, our logistics more specifically, and we will continue to have very low leverage, and the company will go back to being an excellent company for the payout of dividends. This was what we were in the past, and we will be once again. Here, with the payout that we carried out in 2021, 251 million reais, a payout of 95%. Now, this year, we have already paid out intermediate dividends of 327 million reais, using 140 million reais of profit reserve and 108 million, a payout of 95% on the profit for the first half of the year. We can expect, therefore, that in the last 6 months of the year, we will reach a similar level in terms of payout to the shareholders of the company. We're going to see very high payout rates, not necessarily of 95%, because this will depend on the long short, as Carlos Sepulveda says. We have to anticipate the demand curve, of course, but you can expect a high payout of 7-8%. And if we have room in the balance, if we find opportunities for good returns, as we found when investing in the liquid bulk assets in the port of Itaqui, the company will have sufficient balance to carry out acquisitions. Now, this is our mindset. This is how we think. This is our game plan. And we are extremely focused on doing this. We have a growth and value case here, as you can see, because do take note of this. We have long growth cycles, and despite the threats that appear in the horizon, we will not repeat what happened in the past. Despite having new entrants in the port of Santos in the coming 5 or 7 years, this port is working with 5,100,000 TEUs in 2022. In 2027-28, we will be at 6.5 million TEUs, an increase of 20-25% in capacity. This is simply a scenario, of course. Now, human beings have a poor memory. They remember what has harmed them significantly. And in 2014, where there was a doubling of capacity with a severe financial crisis, of course, this is what we will remember. But we truly do not believe that this will be the scenario going forward, even though these threats materialize, and we are ready to face these threats. We're always rooting for the best, but at Santos Brasil, we get ready for the worst. This is what the CEO does when managing this portfolio of assets. I would like to end my presentation by showing you the work that the investor relations team has carried out in this last cycle, the last 5-year cycle. The graph, the performance of Santos Brasil, referring to the small caps index, we're doing well. Once again, because of our fundamentals, the growth drivers of this business that are aligned, they are long lasting. They're not permanent, but they're long lasting. They're fully under control and they're reasonably understandable. It's easy to understand the dynamic of this business and the future behavior, if we project this in the coming 5 years, is something we have in hand. We're ending 2022. We're carrying out the budget for 2023, but we're thinking of 2024, 2025, where we will have 2.6 million TUs. And well, this is something that we will deliver. Why? Because it's necessary, it's inevitable. We will deliver this. But what comes after that? And we're already with an eye on this, looking at 2027, 2029, 2030. And we begin to make decisions to make that present after 2026 a more present period. And we're going to allocate money, perhaps to expand capacity or to become stronger once we understand how the market behaves. The company is presently ever more diversified. There was a time where we had 95% of our shareholder base with nationals. Now, most of this is in the hand of foreigners and in the hand of the company itself, an alignment of interests. And our liquidity has improved significantly, reaching 42 million reais in the average daily traded volume in 2021. And this is the data until June, where we stand at 30 million reais with excellent coverage. 10 top-line institutions purchasing our shares. So I have complied with my time fully, and I try to convey to you these points, the figures, the execution of the strategy of Santos Brasil, the fundamentals, the growth drivers of the company. And I would like to thank you for your attention. I will now give the floor to Carlos Quintero. Carlos Quintero, the Director of Liquid Bulk. Enjoy the presentation. A very good day to all of you. I hope you are all well, and to make the most of the time you are devoting to us and to enhance the information we're sharing with you. I would like to speak about the liquid bulks terminal, which is the new business that Santos Brasil has begun. As Antonio Carlos mentioned, the decision to enter this segment was thoroughly surveyed for several years, and finally we are turning this into a reality. Now, why enter the operation of liquid bulk, and why do this at the Itaqui port? Now, liquid bulk, this industry, well, publicly, we look at the balance of companies that release their information, and we can acknowledge that this is an industry with interesting margins and cash generation worldwide. And in Brazil, this is more enhanced. And this is something that we have known for quite some time already. One of the explanations for the profitability of this segment, which is something normal, are the entry barriers offered by this business. It is relatively difficult to begin a business from scratch. And for those who are in the business of liquid bulk, these companies are normally sold out. And if they are sold at very steep prices. Now, this opportunity came about because the Ministry of Infrastructure in April of 2021 at the port of Itaqui in Maranhão carried out an auction of 4 areas for the handling of fuel. And at that specific point, Santos Brasil won 3 of these 4 areas through this auction. The port of Itaqui was of interest for Santos Brasil because of the points that I will share with you at present. We begin with the proximity to the Gulf of Mexico. Maranhão and the north and northeast of Brazil are closer to the thick of the imports of fuel to Brazil. And of course, this facilitates logistics. The ships will make a call before coming to the rest of the ports in the country. Additionally to this, the port of Itaqui does have a natural advantage that no other port in Brazil has. In one of the berths, the distance is draft. One is 13, 15, and 19 meters. Now, to explain this, the liquid bulk port of Santos has 12 meters compared to this one. Now, the Suape port, which is the largest port in the handling of liquid bulk, has a draft of 15 meters. What does this mean? And the port of Santos has a limitation when it comes to the size of ships it receives. It can receive ships of 40 to 50,000 cubic meters. Now, the port of Itaqui can receive ships with threefold that size. And of course, this translates into competitiveness when importing fuel because of the cost of freight. Now, this port also has excellent highway access, enabling us to distribute the fuel throughout the region, and a very good railroad access. What is more important is the railroad access. Now, this railroad access encompasses a very large area, and it comes to the center west, and of course has a significant impact on agribusiness. Now, the region does not have any refineries. All of the fuel that reaches that region comes from abroad. And if it comes from abroad, it has to go through the port and our terminals. It supplies the region, and through railroad will come to the heart of the agribusiness region. Now, as agronegócio, Mr. Antonio Carlos mentioned, the hinterlands in agribusiness are important. We are servicing a business that in Brazil, as we know, has excellence and excellent competitiveness. Agribusiness has grown significantly in the last few years, with the expectation that this will continue, and we will be participating in this growth through our liquid bulk business. The Itaqui port was the 4th largest port in terms of the handling of liquids in 2022. According to the ANTAC statistics, it went beyond the port of Paranaguá and has now become the 3rd most important port in the handling of liquids.
So let me tell you a bit about what we will operate in the next couple of months. As mentioned, Santos Brasil won the auction in 3 areas. So Of these three areas, one is greenfield, meaning that all we have there are hills and woods, but two of them are brownfield, meaning that they had carried previous operations before. In the concession contract and during the auction that was used to serve as the basis for our business, it it foresees that the previous leasers for these operations would be dismantled. They had three fuel distribution companies, the three biggest in the country, and these renters would need to remove their equipment because they were not reversible to the port. And whoever won the auction, in this case Santos Brasil, would need to rebuild and expand the area according to the lease contract. Logically, there was a negotiation. This contract was changed, and the old leasers did not need to disinstall this equipment, and Santos Brasil acquired them through a lower value than what capex we would need to spend for building this from scratch. After the negotiation in April this year, Santos Brasil signed the necessary terms, taking over the area, and started providing maintenance to the tanks so that they can start operations. And this will begin until the end of the year. And they'll start at an optimal state, as if they were new tanks, with a lifespan projected at 20 years. So we perform maintenance for all this time. Since April, Santos Brasil has created an operational, or has hired an operational team for the terminals. It also invested in IT. It created the IT infrastructure to support the operation. And it also worked on licenses. So there are cities involved, firefighters, environmental operating licenses, ANP, and at the state we are currently at, TGL3, one of our areas, has completed all of these steps. We recently concluded the last stage, which was operating authorization from ANP. For the second terminal, in the next few days, we expect to also get the operating authorization from ANP to start our operation. So how do we begin? It starts with an original capacity of 50,000 cubic meters. This was the capacity that supported the distribution companies that were installed here before. But this is going to go up fourfold, and I'll explain in the next slide. So what is the current infrastructure in the terminals to provide services to our clients? They have storage tanks of several sizes. So the larger ones are for large volume products, in our case diesel, and the smaller tanks are used for lower volume products, such as biodiesel, hydrous, ethanol, which has a lower penetration in the region, in the state of Maranhão. It also has road loading platforms, especially for the local market, and rail loading, where we can receive fuel wagons for long distance. Of course, we also have storage areas, an administrative building, maintenance area, and it connects to the berths. So how does a liquid operation work? The vessel comes in and its pumps are connected through ducts to our terminal tanks, and products are then pumped from the vessel to the terminal. In Maranhão, they are normally receiving cargo. They're normally importing. But you can also have the opposite flow. So we can receive products by truck or rail, store them in our tanks, and when a vessel comes in, we can also load it, especially ethanol. It's a product that, although right now it's at a low volume, it is a local export product. I'm talking about the current moment because there have been divestments in the north part of the Brazilian Midwest in corn ethanol plants. This product, once it reaches enough of a production level, it will probably be exported through the Itaqui port, which is very competitive, as I said. Now, the products that we are authorized to move in this terminal are fuels. This is a fuel terminal. So it includes diesel, gasoline, ethanol, because ethanol is also mixed in the gasoline from the terminal in whatever clients take their products from this terminal, and also biodiesel, which is also mixed with diesel within our terminal. So that's how we operate a terminal of this sort. To speak about the future and where we're headed to, in the previous slide I mentioned that we're starting with 50,000 square meters. This is a small size terminal, but 190,000 square meters is a decent size in the liquid storage industry. It's a volume that makes us very competitive. I didn't mention this, but here scale is an essential factor to our business. The margins that you can get go up significantly when you have more than 100,000 square meters, and this is according to my experience. So when we are at 190,000 square meters of capacity, which will be in 2026, we will be at 22% of our capacity share. We'll have 7 terminals at the port and 22% of capacity share in the port. Now, what will we execute? Well, the concession contracts we signed foresee and mandate the expansions that we approved across all plants. We're starting to execute these plans in the next few months. So we will expand these 2 terminals. Excuse me. So we'll expand these 2 terminals and build a terminal in the greenfield. In yellow, we see the existing tanks. Again, that 59,000 square meter capacity. And in blue, we see what will be built in the future. In the brownfield area, we have a 3-year term to deliver on this capacity. And for the greenfield area, a 4-year term. So that's why we are saying that this capacity will be built until 2026. The project we created will improve the business plan that was shown when the auction was opened, because we managed to get an area for potential future tanking. This is not in the original business plan, but it is certainly a possibility that will allow us to expand if the market grows and demands it. New investments will give us even better margins than we had originally planned. In the existing terminals, we're growing we're expanding 59,000 square meters, and in the new terminal, an additional 81,000 square meters. We will use the same products, except for hydrous ethanol, which will be added. We don't operate anything with it yet. So since we're building the entire terminal, the terminal will operate as a state-of-the-art plant when it's expanded. So we will have as much automation as we can here. The terminal currently does not use scales. It usually uses dosing and measuring equipment to load the fuel trucks, but we're going to modernize all of the equipment we use to provide the best productivity we can. Even better than what is currently available in the Itaqui port. We'll be at a better level when it comes to automation and productivity. Not only are we building future tanking, but we're doubling the number of loading and unloading positions for rail loading. This is the biggest growth opportunity in this market. So rail investments will continue in the two companies that service Itaqui. They're continuing to expand. They're continuing to go into the Brazilian Midwest, and this will increase how much cargo goes through the port and our terminals. So our project wants to keep track of that growth so that we can also have more capacity. This greenfield terminal is more geared towards road loading. And one of the advantages we have is that it's safer and more efficient than our competitors. It's the bottle road system. It's more specific to fuel, so it creates a faster operation, gate to gate, and will have a better service level with more safety. Finally, this is our business model and how it works. Clients can contract a capacity. So we're starting with 50,000 cubic meters. So let's imagine that we need this for diesel and gasoline and so on. And so they're paying fixed storage, which is the price for every cubic meter contracted. And that represents 80 to 90% of the terminal's revenue. But it can also provide other services. For example, additional throughput, ship operation, product transfer, and that will make up for the rest of the revenue. Additional throughput, just to explain the concept. When you contract a capacity, you're also contracting the volumes that you can operate every month. So if you contracted 5,000, you can have a throughput of 5,000. You can fill when the vessel comes in, and that will run out when you fill your trucks and wagons. If you're efficient and if you're bringing in your vessel and emptying your tank and then bringing a second vessel in the month, that's what we call the second throughput. That's very important for the client because it reduces their average cost. Obviously, the second throughput will come at a lower price, and that makes its average price go down. For the terminal, this is also very positive because your costs and revenues have been paid in the first throughput, and the second one will be additional. So your profitability per cubic meter of installed capacity will go up. So that is a good way of benefiting both sides. In the future, in 2026, when all of our structure and our new capacity is concluded, we expect to have a net revenue of 120 million to 160 million Brazilian reals and an EBITDA margin of 60 to 70%. This is what we expect. This is in line with what we know about how this kind of business goes in this industry. So this is the expectation that we have for 2026. Well, I hope to have given you a lot of information. This is a very different sort of business from what Santos Brasil has done so far, but it's a great opportunity that we have to make use of the operational expertise that we have, the expertise that we have in managing ports, and all of the principles that we've mentioned so far. We hope that it can all be used in this new business to make it even better than the remaining parts of the industry. So thank you. I'll pass it over to Beatrice.
Obrigada.
Vou deixar isso aqui comigo.
Bom dia.
Good morning. My name is Beatrice, and it's a challenge to be the last speaker of this event. But I am half French and half Brazilian. And I've been in Brazil for 15 years, and I still have trouble using plurals. So wish me luck. But let's cut to the chase. Let's talk about Santos Brasil. I'll start my presentation with this quote from a speech given at the Nobel Prize for Literature by writer Albert Camus. This was said in 1957. When it comes to ESG, unfortunately, this is still a very current quote. But what is Santos Brasil doing to contribute towards a more sustainable future? Well, Santos Brasil signed the UN Global Compact since 2013, and we are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. Among our main challenges, we've taken a commitment to actively contribute to preserve the environment and for human development. So we have constantly updated our environmental management standards through follow-up and control on GHG emissions, waste generation, and water consumption. We've set our goals publicly in 2020, and this is connected to our top management's compensation and also our employees. We are going to cut GHG emissions by 15%, water consumption by 30%, and this is in cubic meters per capita, and we aim to cut waste generation by 50% by 2024. Our emissions are classified according to the GA protocol, Greenhouse Gas Control, and we're set in 3 different scopes. And the first scope, we want to manually have an inventory of greenhouse gases through a CIS platform indicators. As Antonio Carlos said before, we also have advanced backyard electrification by buying 10 electric RTGs, which will arrive in 2023. We have IoT on all of our vehicles to cut fuel usage, and we're using cleaner fuels with biodiesel.
In scope 2, that refers to electrical energy, at present we offset 100% of GHG in scope 2 for all of the units in Sao Paulo. And until the end of 2022, all of our units will be fully offset. Now, how did we do this? By using renewable energy sources through IRAC, the international standards, and Scope 3. We have always identified opportunities for energy efficiency and a reduction of cost in our supply chain, changing all of our lamps for LEDs at all units, present sensors to reduce energy in the warehouse, using emergency systems supplied by solar energy. And we involve all of our employees to be able to reduce emissions when they're traveling for business and in displacements, and they have to voluntarily report the emissions generated on their business trips. When it comes to water consumption, we have effluent treatment systems for the reutilization of water. We reuse rainfall water. Where? In the cleaning of our yards, in the washing of our equipment, storing water for emergencies. And this year, we installed automatic faucets. We also manage water systems through telemetry and hydrometers. When it comes to the waste generation, last year we bought a biodigester of organic residues, and we have already treated 51 million tons in-house. We carried out a campaign called No More Plastic, with a reduction of 54% in the use of plastic cups at all of our units. We have 83% of our residues generated that are undergoing recycling, and of course, selective collection and reverse logistics. This year, we began a program on environmental education geared to our providers, the community, and our employees at large. I would now like to speak about social aspects, because ESG is based on 3 pillars. We tend to focus on the E and forget the S, but for Santos Brasil, the S is part of our daily work and our strategy. We have supported and structured social inclusion initiatives with the goal of expanding the opportunities to access education, culture, and sports to foster citizenship and local developments. This year, we approved 27 programs, incentive projects with an impact on 9,000 people. If I can share a spoiler with you, we have opened up a bid for all the incentive projects. Last month, we received 215 projects. The coming year, we should be increasing this figure twofold. From 27, we will get to 50 projects for the coming year. This, of course, is very positive, amplifying the impact that we have in society. We maintain a program called Formare, helping young people in social vulnerability. We have administrative courses in the port area. This has been acknowledged by the Labor Ministry. We have trained 291 youngsters, and 113 students were hired by Santos Brasil. This is a course that extends for 15 months with technical and theoretical classes offered by volunteers at Tecon Santos. What sets us aside is that the teachers are our own employees, and you can see that the rate of working in the labor market is very high. 93% of the young people are able to find jobs in the market. We have also focused on the operational safety of our employees and third parties. This has become a very relevant and priority issue for the company in 2020. Besides all of the prevention measures to fight against the COVID pandemic, we continued to apply protocols, rules, legislation referring to safety with an emphasis on quality of life and the prevention of accidents. We renewed our campaign Zero Accidents that began in 2019 among the children of our employees to raise awareness and lead to preventive behavior in our team when it comes to safety. We had a reduction of 60% in the number of lost time accidents vis-à-vis the results we obtained in 2020. And in terms of diversity and inclusion, well, at Santos Brasil, we do value diversity and inclusion. For the fourth consecutive years, we were considered as a great place to work. Now, notwithstanding this, and despite all of our achievements, the implementation and total acceptance of diversity and inclusion, we know that we have a long path to follow within our company and in society. At the beginning of the year, we carried out a diversity census to identify the profile of diversity in the company. We have built a robust program for diversity and inclusion with 70 initiatives that will be undertaken until 2025. All of the leadership participated in training in terms of unconscious bias and inclusive leadership. We have worked with communication, sustainability, legal and compliance. All of these groups underwent training. We carried out a live for the organization referring to unconscious biases. These are but the first steps of the program. We're going to send and issue a guide on diversity, and we'll hold the first encounter of diversity in Santos, Brazil. We're working with vacancies that are exclusive for disabled people, and we disseminated the first affirmative vacancy for women in the group. We are also working with My Inclusive Job program to include people that are disabled in the labor market. And 1 month ago, we inaugurated a nursing room in our largest unit. This is but the first step. Very soon, all the units will have a nursing room for all the women in Santos, Brazil. During the last year, we increased the participation of women by 19% in the company and 16% at leadership level. And we have increased by 10% the number of disabled people in the company. When it comes to governance, now Santos Brasil has been part of the Novo Mercado since 2016. Now, we are part of the SP Brazil and ESG Index and EGPTW. We have an independent board of management with 2 women at the helm. Our fiscal council is a permanent one. We have an audit committee with independent members, and 1 share is equal to 1 vote. Last year, we won the prize 2021 due to our compliance, ethics, and integrity program. Our case was called approved behavior. This was done through a reality show online. Our employees would track candidates that were part of a fictitious screening process. We have enhanced the communication training and compliance campaigns. We had 99.8% of our administrative team trained online, and all of our workers in the operational part were trained in person by the compliance group. We have an external reporting channel that is independent and open for all employees and third parties. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see some of the awards that we received this year. Exame 360 Institutional Investor, Great Place to Work, and S&P B3 Brazil and the ESG Index. This year, once again, we won the prize on ethics, integrity, and compliance, but this time with training of IR done jointly with communication. It is called Santos Brasil in the stock market. This is a web series that was held in 2021, extending for 3 months. It was held to strengthen the company culture. And part of the onboarding members are part of our new employees. Any new employee at Santos Brasil mandatorily has to carry out this onboarding for Santos Brasil to fully understand what the company is about, why it is listed in the stock market. And here you can see some of the modules: capital market, corporate governance, the company's administration, rights and duties, and the investment relation area. To conclude, and I'm still within my time, Danielle. Which are the outlooks for the ESG future of Santos Brasil? For the coming year, we have already mapped some of our movements for the UN Global Compact: water, the mental health of employees, and net zero ambition for decarbonizing. In December, if everything goes well, we will be part of the select portfolio of ISE. Our supply chain will be ever more sustainable, including ethics and environmental measures. We will continue to invest in innovation, creativity, and state-of-the-art technology. These are the main allies of sustainability. And of course, we will expand our biodiversity projects. Thank you very much, and I would like to give the floor to Juliano to begin the Q&A. Our many thanks to all of you.
Pessoal, obrigado.
Well, thank you very much. We're now going to go on to the question and answer session. We do have 2 people with a microphone. Should you wish to pose a question, please raise your hand. If you're online, send your question online, and after the event, we will respond to all of the questions. Very well, we can begin. Raise your hands should you have a question. A short doubt in terms of your leverage, of course. The scenario for the coming 4 or 5 years is highly positive. What can we expect of less than 1 times leverage? Which would be the right leverage level for you? What I can say is that less as a target, perhaps as a ceiling. This is not a business that should work above 2 times net debt EBITDA. Well, because of the reasons that I mentioned in my presentation, we do have a more volatile business. We have these cycles that you are aware of. That is why we have so much upside when the growth drivers are aligned. And this is the beauty of this business for those who are willing to seek investments in infrastructure with a higher returns that are higher than other sectors with managed returns. But simultaneously, does that demand that discipline of not over leveraging the company? So 1.5 or 2 times net debt over EBITDA, I think the company could easily withstand that. Now, given the investments and opportunities for growth and distribution of dividends, it's natural that we will begin to have an optimized capital structure. To add to this, you have watched the presentation. We're now going to enter a phase with heavy cash generation in the assets of the company, and we're reaching 1 billion in cash. We began investing in 2018, 2019 to reach the capacity we have at present. We're going to generate cash heavily. And there are 2 paths there. Either you add value to the business or you pay out dividends. We should enter an era for the payment of dividends. It's possible that we will have M&A in new projects. There are some projects that are being surveyed, but we're highly demanding in terms of auctions and otherwise. As Daniel mentioned, this is a capital-intensive sector, and there is a great deal of competition. You have to carefully select the areas that you enter. The market has to be good, and of course, we are seeking 2-digit returns. There are 2 paths. If we go through the M&A way, the capital structure will improve. If we don't do this, we will pay out dividends. But in the near future, we hope to have another enterprise simply to complement our liquid bulk project or work with other bulk systems or containers. The Brazilian market has more than 2 billion tons. There are plenty of opportunities, and the agribusiness of Brazil is a true champion. The infrastructure created in the last 3 years is opening a large array of opportunities. And of course, we will create a more efficient capital structure. If you allow me, and to go back to leveraging, we're very stringent in the quality of our debt. You may have observed in our slides that 97% of the debt is local. It's a long-term debt, a duration of 9 years, an extremely long for Brazil. And when you look at the Itaqui port, that will require investments of 600 million reais, including the grant. We were able to finance 80% of that capex through the Bank of the Northeast at the lowest cost of Brazil. The funding is normally at 60%. In special conditions, this reaches 80%, and our project, therefore, was included in this project of the BNB. It's not only about the limits of the leverage, but the quality of our debt, and we do pursue a debt at very low rates and long-term or with a great deal of duration. This is our mindset. Pedro Bruno from XP. My question is about M&As, and I think Antonio Carlos has referred to this very generally. I would like to refer to logistics. This created some expectations. This is a sector that necessarily will go through M&As because of the characteristic of this segment and because you are very close to the port. You have a niche in terms of logistics. So which is your vision of M&A in logistics and for the port of Santos more specifically? Well, we have surveyed some possibilities, and logistics demands knowledge, a database, and contracts. Now, to allocate capital in that means you have to find a very low price because the risk of having a reversion is enormous. It's not similar to port assets. It was very difficult to find something that would have the right fit and would give us a safe return in synergy with our assets. Not that we have not survived this. This was our mindset during the follow-on, but we understood that the most profitable path would be to delay the growth of logistics. We need to have a large business equivalent to the other assets that we have in our portfolio.
But we thought it was better to invest in information and data treatment so that we could grow more organically than through M&As. We have two very good assets in the Santos port that make up Tecon Santos, that complement our logistics. But there's a huge development avenue in connecting to Tecon Santos. We expect to grow by double-digit figures per year in logistics. That's what we're pursuing. We really want to overcome that 100 million barrier in EBITDA to make this business more significant in our portfolio. So we were able to overcome this barrier, and you always have to look at absolute figures in relative terms. So what we want to do now is to have high returns on capital in an asset-light business by using all of the synergies we have with all the capital we've invested, especially in the Santos port. So I think we have a unique equation in Brazil. It really belongs to the company because this is what we've done from the beginning with Tecon Santos. This is not normal for container terminal operators, especially with the quality we have at Tecon, to have so much expertise on logistics. This is something we've developed over decades, and now we're going to make use of it to leverage as much as we can our investments in the industry. So Antonio Carlos mentioned a crucial point here, Bruno. The logistics market is huge, and it can encompass many things. The point is, what is relevant to a company like Santos Brasil? Where do we have a competitive edge? And that's where you start. The universe of logistics is then greatly reduced when you do that, because we understand our competitive edge in the logistics industry is integrated to port logistics. And there are several assets that no longer make sense for the kind of returns and the kind of synergies that we seek to capture. It's a small universe, and that even generates questions during our follow-on. We said, don't imagine us as JCL, which is brilliant at what they do, but we're not aiming for that. That's not interesting for us. We don't have a competitive advantage at doing that. Our chances of getting it wrong will be much higher, and that's why it requires a more specific and focused outlook to a business that Santos Brasil intends to pursue. So that's our mindset. And King used to say that when facts change, our opinion changes. And we saw many opportunities in 2021 and 2022 in the infrastructure industry. We chased the opportunities that we imagined would bring good returns and good terms, and we ended up acquiring 3 liquid bulk terminals, and we looked at many other opportunities, some of which were relevant but did not pan out. It's a huge business when you look at it, and we have a very competent M&A team. We can say that they are not good terms for the contracts. They're not going to provide the returns that we want for our capital. So then it's better to reassess your company, which is not repositioning yourself, but reassessing your capital allocation with the facts. It's better to face it than to make a mistake with your shareholders' assets. So in our mind, if we find any good things, we'll do it. But if not, we will do something else without forgetting about our capacity to seek good investments. I just want to add something from the commercial side. In this presentation, you saw how our EBITDA went from 8 to what we said it would be at the end of this year. So we had 3 phases in this process since 2019. First, there was a cultural shift. We wanted to make it into a business mandate, not only something that for an area that would support our port operation. The second phase was a transformation in our people, processes, and technology with the enablers we mentioned. And during that second phase, we realized that we had much better conditions to maximize the results we had than what we saw outside. As Antonio Carlos said, we need to be very selective and very responsible in looking at what opportunities we have and what decisions we make. So that was only the beginning. The second stage is transformation, but we're not going to have major communication campaigns in the market to say that we're not only port operations, but we also work in logistics. But this change in the second phase made us be seen as a logistics operator as well. Now we're actively and spontaneously participating. We're being invited by major multinationals for logistics operations in 3PL. We're looking at a $15 million contract right now, and it's asset light. All we need to do is to have storage, and in our market share, our storage will be completely filled to have more services and to absorb more product lines in the automotive industry. So the profitability and the connectivity of what we already did by expanding everything that we did is giving us the possibility of looking at these projects and participating in them even more. Having expertise in connectivity in bonded warehouses is making us have much more potential. And this doesn't mean that we don't have our radars turned on, but of course, maximizing the profitability of what we already have. And that data lake of 9,000 active users is giving us more possibilities. Good morning. My name is Victor. I'm from Bradesco BBI, and I have 2 questions. First, you showed a slide with 2 graphs showing how the global logistics market would normalize. And we saw that freight prices would normalize. So how does this impact Santos Brasil's strategies to recompose its prices for next year? The second question is related to ESG. Antonio Carlos mentioned carbon emission authorizations. So since many of your clients are foreign, how has that figured into your strategy? Thank you. Before I pass it over to Ricardo, shipping prices are going down, and that's very good for Santos Brasil because that increases the amount of cargo that you're transporting in container ships. A lot of cargo was left aside from container vessels to general cargo vessels. So that's very good for us. And another important thing from that graph is that we're starting to see more vessels. By this obstruction from the northern hemisphere, no longer having queues, releases more vessels. And when you have more cargo, you need to have vessels to transport it. So these issues are being left behind, and that creates new opportunities, which is having a highway in sea lanes. This already exists. I mean, this is better for container ship owners, but they didn't have vessels available. And now we have three main ship owners, MSC, Maersk, and CMAGM. These are the three biggest in the world, and they're here on the Brazilian coast. They all have cabotage, and this gives us the opportunity of expanding domestic cargo and feeder services. And this will really benefit the TCOM for its efficiency. So the more large vessels we have with transshipment, the better it is for TCOM. So I'll pass it over to Carlos, who's going to give us some more details on the impact that it has. Thank you for your question, Victor. So continuing what Antonio Carlos said, first, both graphs show very positive benefits for Brazil, for Santos, and especially for TCOM. TCOM always grows above what the Port of Santos does. So when we remove the global bottlenecks that also impact Brazil, this will increase our growth in Santos as a hub for Brazil. And freight, will that have a positive impact on tariffs or not? Well, I'll split your answer into two. As freight goes down, our forecast, which was already an increase in the peak season and it returned to normal levels from July, has allowed us to have a record 111,000 boxes transported in September. Would this have happened if international Shanghai prices had gone down? Maybe not. Of course, we expected 106, 107, but it went up to 111. So this is the consequence of the two factors that we mentioned. A China without backlog, freight going down during the peak season, and ship owners being aware that this movement should return in the best way possible. Regarding tariffs, they're much more connected to what we look at every day in our forecasts. In this way, who is investing as much as we are in Brazil? What capacities do these terminals have, and where can we see ourselves as competitors? Even in Santos, how is the international market being priced? So tariffs go far beyond just the price of shipping. We have to have deep studies to set a price, and we need to understand that the balance between investing capital and efficiency needs to be there, and it needs to be palatable to our peer group in Brazil and in the rest of the world. That's what sets our tariffs. Just referring to freight, you used a great term, which is normalization. So we expected freight to not remain at those levels. So what happened and what is being thoroughly discussed is that normalization is coming faster than we imagined. But if you pay attention, you'll see that there was a drop which is much sharper in between China and LA, China and Northern Europe, and China and New York, the east coast of the US. But it's a very soft curve between China and the port of Santos. There are still some aftershocks for the northern hemisphere. No one expected the war, and that accelerated normalization for the freight curve, and it declines sharply, but freight is remaining high in the Brazilian routes. So Brazil is a bit of a standout there. And when you look at that closely, when you understand what is being transported in the commercial routes to Brazil and from Brazil, this volume is resilient. We're talking about exports of sugar, coffee, chemical products, oil products, frozen meat, poultry, frozen fruit. So these are basic global consumption products that will not go down because these are basic goods. They're not luxury items, which are usually more affected when your available income goes down. And what do we import? Car parts and for vehicles that will be exported from Brazil to Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Mexico. So industry inputs. Brazil has a lower industrial level, so we import many of these goods, but very few of the items are electronics and apparel and so on. So these products are very resilient. So freight reduction will not affect our price normalization in our assets in the Port of Santos. Victor, continuing on carbon emissions, the transportation industry is very relevant when it comes to carbon emissions. 14% of CO2 equivalent emissions are in transportation, and it's 4% in ship transportation. So the first continent to explore alternatives was Europe. Ship owners in Europe are looking at ethanol-powered vessels, and they're looking at their entire chain. What have we been doing? So you can replace all of your equipment for electric vehicles, but that will come at a fortune. A piece of equipment costs 30 million Brazilian reals, so you can't just change it overnight. How do we do it? We have a long project that started in 2004. It was executed until 2008 and 2009. Most of our equipment have combustion engines, and they need to be replaced. But we're now having a decarbonization project. We're going to look at our ship owners list, and we want to contribute positively in the first scope. So that's our mindset. We want to be able to offer a green port naturally without any additional investments to switch everything, because this is required by the ship owners because they want to reduce their own carbon footprint. So our early entry into this market is allowing us to clean up the terminal without any additional effort. This is coming naturally in our investment plan. Everything we're investing in that curve I showed to reach the 2.6 comes from that mind frame. Working with electrical equipment, Brazil has a huge advantage. We're one of the cleanest countries in the world. Our concept is starting to be discussed, which is bringing production closer to consumption so that you don't require as much transportation, so that you can cut your carbon footprint across your products. So if we were efficient, if we had the technology to replace our equipment as other countries do, we would have an even greater advantage. China is the biggest industry in the world, and they have a 30% share of the carbon emitted in the world. So they are the dirtiest country when it comes to carbon emissions. Brazil would have a very good position if we were there. And we've started doing it a long time ago. We're in our 14th year working with sustainability. We looked deep into it, and we're fitting it into our longer projects with that perspective of always seeing where Santos Brasil wants to be in the future and where we will be. We're going to have a green port in Santos ready to help ship owners reduce their carbon footprint.
Well, simply to add this, the ESG client, we're faced with two realities that go hand in hand. You spoke about international clients. Any company that wants to be part of the bid of an international client has to have a cutoff point in terms of ESG. So these clients are pressuring the companies to have a higher ESG level year after year. Year after year, the cutoff score will tend to increase. That's the first point. We also have an industry that, or several industries that have created ESG seals. We have EcoVadis, for example, a chemical company, several international companies coming together, creating a sustainability seal. Those who do not fit into the cutoff score of this seal, they will not work with that company. This is the scenario that we are faced with. And Santos Brasil, of course, is participating in all of these bids for the reasons mentioned by Antonio Carlos. This is not something that we began now. Our focus has always been on ESG. Secondly, the value chain, how you work with your client, and ESG, how to work in a partnership. Antonio Carlos referred to transportation. We have green projects with our clients to shorten the distance, for example, or not to return with empty trucks, for example. All of this is part of our commercial strategy. So ESG is part of our commercial strategy. And in 2023, we're going to open up our value chain to our suppliers, enabling us to become a company that does demand a certain ESG level from our suppliers, not only clients demanding this from us. Good morning. This is Gabriel Rezende from Itaú BBA. Thank you for taking my question. I think that the short-term drivers are very well aligned and positive. We're speaking of room to readjust tariffs, volumes reaching records in September, the company margin hitting records in the last 10 years, a possibility of expansion to new terminals, and the payout of dividends. Because of this very positive short-term scenario, I would like to refer to the medium-term scenario and a possible expansion of capacity for containers, which will be the drivers for a structural growth and demand for capacity at the Port of Santos. Of course, the short-term drivers have been made very clear, but as we still have those remnants of 214, 215, what is it that will give the company comfort to ensure that competition will be healthy in the coming years? Very good question. And this is something that we track very closely and that is followed up on by other operators at the Port of Santos. Now, what separates us from what happened in 2013, the absolute figures, the Port of Santos this year will close with a handling of more than 5,000 TEUs. With every 5% growth, the port will grow an additional 250,000 TEUs. It's more than the capacity of Vila do Conde. There are few ports with more than 400,000 TEUs. You only have them in the south or in Santos all of the others are below this. So the annual growth figure of the Port of Santos is very high, very challenging. The only company that can work with up to 3 million is Santos Brasil, and we have a project for 2.6 million. Now, this project has to be implemented. The Santos Brasil alone will not be able to support the growth of the port. Now, the problem is when this terminal will come. Depending on when it arrives, it could have a significant impact. Our occupation could drop from 90 to 60%. Now, these projects do take some time after they are being bid, and the ST10 is a brownfield project. You have to build the entire key again, and we're estimating a minimum term of 5 years before the commissioning, until the end of commissioning. Why? Because after the company is able to do this, we have the executive project, the environmental licensing. We will then begin construction and operation. Now, this puts us beyond that graph of 2.6 million TEUs, beyond the year 2028. This is something that has gone back to the drawing board because of some inconsistencies in the original project, and we're resurveying this. It is the last area in the Port of Santos, working with fertilizers, vehicles, general cargo, something that is not in the terminals at present. They're adapting that terminal to be able to absorb those cargoes. But this will happen only at the end of 2023, which takes us to beyond 2028 with the terminal concluded. And until that date, we can guarantee that we will reach the 3 million TEUs, but we will need that project. It will have 25% of the port capacity, and evidently it will have an impact on our cash flow. But we believe that until then, we're shorting the contracts, but perhaps when we have the conclusion, this will be inverted. We will look for long-term contracts to minimize that drop that we will have once the terminal comes into operation. There's another very important point. We were very fearful of entering a terminal. Why? There's that story of the self-reference. The terminal begins with 100% occupation, and what will happen then, it will have a market share that is much higher than its capacity share. This has already been regulated by ANTAC, that has stipulated that for 11 years, if the auction is won by MFC, they will have to have a market share that is not higher than its capacity share. And this has given us the ability to carry out all of these investments. The discussion is ongoing. A national class entity deepen the discussion, not because of what was happening at the port, but to create that protection so that when this terminal is inaugurated, the competition can be well balanced. We're not against having ship owners or others entering. We do have to have the proper conditions to compete in that market, and we're quite calm with this. This was not the case in the past. We doubled the capacity of the port. We enhanced capacity by 100%. Two terminals were not able to withstand this. And we also had what we call that perfect storm, that horrendous fiscal storm at the end of the government of Dilma Rousseff, with a drop of 80% in GDP. Now, this will not be repeated. We're very calm in terms of continuing on with our investments, and the cycle continues. The areas are scarce. Now, year after year, we have the entry of a larger number of containers, and we're quite calm in terms of the medium term, not the short term. We work with long cycles of terminals with a certain level of utilization with marginal investments to generate capacity. Tecon is ready. It is a marvelous terminal that operates extremely well. And these are adjustments in the yard and improvement in movement to be able to absorb the capacity. The berth is ready. So the company is ready to have a long cycle of beyond 5 years to generate wealth with a great deal of tranquility. I would like to emphasize something that Antonio Carlos did not mention and that is very important. When you carry out your analysis, you should focus on capacity and become aware of what would have to happen to have a drastic economic scenario to the point where the volume of the cargo mix at the Port of Santos will be modified and will worsen. At that time, we had two consecutive drops of 2 to 3% of GDP. It's not natural that this will happen. Of course, it could happen, but this should not be a probable scenario. And once again, you have to look at the competition. What happened at that time? Antonio Carlos referred to two small terminals. In truth, there were three. We still had Libra, Hodimar, and the port, all fighting for their survival. The market nowadays, despite the new entrants, has become more efficient. Why? Because the demands in terms of the size of vessel, the amount of capital that you will invest, and the size of the terminal is no longer part of that competitive scenario that we observed until not only 2014, but until 2019. Inefficient players do not disappear overnight. It takes some time for them to disappear. And while they disappear, we have that damage in 2 or 3 year cycles. So yes, you should look at the addition of capacity vis-a-vis the demand in the year 2029, 2030. How many players will remain, the efficiency of those players, and that issue mentioned by Antonio Carlos, that the government, differently from 2014, when they had authorized BTP and Ebra Port, well, nowadays, no, the entire society is debating this rigorously with a focus on healthy and sound competition for the largest port in Brazil, the largest port in South America. And I truly do not believe that we can mirror what happened in the past with what could happen in the future. That is why we have that confidence. And once again, this is through long-lasting and long cycles. Of course, there is no control of the future. I would like to invite you to look upon this from a second viewpoint. We should be very transparent when dealing with this issue. I also believe that nobody doubts the growth of demand. You have just heard from the CEO of Santos Brasil that we can have 2.6 million TEUs until 2028. We're not discussing if this will happen or not, but what will happen and what to do until that materializes. Now, to add an upside tinge to the analysis that you do in Antonio Carlos's presentation, you saw that large part of our revenues are not pegged to the keys. When we speak about the capacity, I'm going to speak on behalf of our clients here. There are some types of services that cause inefficiencies in the ports, operational inefficiencies. What happens are secondary areas in bonded warehouses carry out services that for the port are slow services. They do not bring about efficiency. That breakdown of cargo for exports or labeling, for example, all of those revenues of accessory services do not speak to the capacity of the quay or containers that are parked literally in a primary zone. The level of demand, the customization that we should have at present are within that range of services that do not bring efficiency, but that do bring profitability gains. And we hear at present about integrated logistics. We hear competitors offering integrated logistics when they have a single port asset. Ladies and gentlemen, the only company that is truly ready with integrated logistics that has rail transportation, the removal of full or empty containers, 2 bonded warehouses, one on each margin, and DCs is Santos Brasil. And of course, the level of prediction of our invoicing is very important, but it's not what is most important. Our investment, our relationship of decades with these multinationals have allowed for this integrated logistic. The numbers of the logistics speak for themselves. And transforming this business is something else that we have to take into account when we are trying to predict capacity. Capacity where exactly? Warehousing and the key for what type of service? What will be left out of this? And what is the worth of what will be left outside of this? I'm simply provoking you so that you can look upon this with different viewpoints. A question for Quintero to ask about the Port of Itaqui. You highlighted the need of having scale benefits, which is the margin that you have in these initial 50,000 cubic meters, and which will be the ramp up of revenues when you operate the first terminal. Good morning, and thank you for your question. Now, which is our vision of this? We spoke about margins of 60 to 70%. Presently, the margin is below this. It's 1/4 of the size. And of course, we're foreseeing scale. We begin now, and presently we have a negative margin. And the projection for scale is to occupy the terminal based on the initial and first contracts. Presently, we have some contracts being negotiated. We're, of course, negotiating the wording to be able to begin, as well as other opportunities that are still being discussed. We created a plan. We're drafting a budget for the coming year where we will begin with a very low occupation and we will grow throughout the year. Why do we begin with a low occupation? Do recall that these terminals were in a situation of standstill, and the former leasers 1 year before had to shelter their operations with contracts in other terminals that existed. So for some time, and we remind you that the market there does work with contracts. You're always working based on a contract with something that is more constant, more consistent. As the contracts mature, Santos Brasil can begin to compete and take part of the market. And what we're looking at initially are 2 very good opportunities. One, we're observing that some clients are complaining about the service levels, and these clients are betting on our operations team. They're the ones that will begin with us very soon. The second opportunity, even for clients who have contracts tend to be for 3 to 5 years for liquid bulk terminals. Now, these clients will grow their volumes, and we're hearing consultations in terms of their new volumes. So the client will honor the client that is in place, and the additional capacity, they're going to test the services of Santos Brasil for that. Our projection, and based on our studies and engineering, we will begin our expansions with service levels, with the experience that we have accrued at the company, and we will be able to fulfill the expectations of these new clients.
I just want to continue the previous discussion on possible privatization in the port. I think it adds to that possibility of STS-10. Well, we see a possible privatization with very good eyes. So I think with the terminals that we already have there, it will be an advantage. We will be able to negotiate our contracts with more flexibility. The government has to go through many processes to change any contract. So when it comes to terms, expansion, it will be much better. And that's an important point on SPA. Honestly, I don't think that STS-10 is the best solution for logistics in Santos, okay? I think the best solution there would be to expand BTP, expand Santos Brasil, and make big terminals. Santos is not that big of a port to have 4 container terminals. It's inefficient, especially because there are connections to the lines. So I'm not sure if a private STS would seek that alternative, but the government cannot do it. Santos Brasil could. It could merge the contract of TICON with TAG. This is foreseen by the law. And then we would go from a 3.0 to a 4.0 TICON. So you could do that if it were private. It can be used differently. So I think privatization, if it happens, will make capital use more rational in the part. For private terminals, I don't even mention, the channel, the access, and that's the biggest bottleneck. Railway access. Santos has a lot of room to grow in bulk exports, and also the access channel. Santos is not going to disappear for a lack of capacity, but because the access channel at a certain point will be stressed. We have enormous ships now, and the private sector would be able to optimize it better. So we really hope it does happen. There are elections going on now in Brazil, and they will be decisive. We don't know if there is a big change, if it will continue as it has been going. We really hope it does. That would be very positive for Santos Brasil, SPA to be privatized, I mean.
Gente, estamos chegando ao fim.
Well, this is the end of Santos Brasil Day 2022. I'd like to thank our speakers. I'd like to thank the communications department who helped us to organize this event. And especially Vinicius and Marjorie from the investor relations area, who make this event happen. So thank you very much for being here. Have a great day.